And we'll just wait one more moment here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this next in our very occasional webinar series that we have. For ABoVE, we have some really focused ones. So we have this Yukon one and one focused on Northwest Territories and one on Alaska. And I'm really pleased today to have Dr. Kimberley Miner be able to present to us. But before we get started, I do want to take a moment here to, um, if I can figure out how to advance the slide. There we go. Um, so in the past, we have done acknowledgments before various meetings that we've had, but we want to acknowledge that there's been some concern about whether or not land acknowledgments are meaningful calls to action and ways that they can be done in a more transformative way. And we learned that in 2021, the American Anthropological Association had been advocated to by the Association for Indigenous Anthropologists to sort of put an official pause on this type of activity to investigate like ways in which these can be done in a sort of more meaningful way. And there, I believe, is a committee that is together that is putting together some recommendations, which are supposed to be in theory released this month. So we are keeping a lookout for that. And so for the time being, we're going to sort of hold off on that but visit our land acknowledgement and the ways that we do that when we find out about that information. I also just want to quickly say, we do have a code of conduct applies to this type of virtual webinar thing as well. So overall, we're committed to providing a safe and welcoming and productive environment, no matter where it is that we're meeting. And we have adopted the American Geophysical Union Scientific Code of Conduct, which does include, being free from bullying and harassment, etc. And we, ask that everybody make a respectful and collegiate atmosphere at all times. Remember to critique ideas, not the individuals. If there is deliberate disruption of, an event like this, that can result in removal from the event. And if you have any things that you'd like to um, report to me or have a conversation about, or any other sort of thing about an unacceptable behavior, please feel free to reach out to me. I put my email address here, and this can also be done confidentially, or if there is a need to do an official report, I can help you sort of navigate that system as well. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing now and turn it over to Kimberley, who is going to begin her presentation, and we'll take some questions at the end. Feel free to go ahead and put the questions into chat if something leaps to your mind and you want to be sure that you don't forget it. Or I think we are a small enough group then too that when we're doing question and answer, we can also just have the opportunity to raise and unmute the mic. The raise hand button you'll see is just at the bottom of the screen. There's a little hand that looks like this. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you now, Kim.
Thanks, Libby, and hi, everyone. I'm really glad to be with you today. I'm glad that we have a smaller group. I'm hoping that that'll lead to some productive conversations and that we can really think together through some of these concepts as we join the question and answer period at the end. All right, so I am Kimberley Miner. I work at the National Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I am a glacier person by training, but have had the opportunity to work with the ABoVE team on varied Arctic concepts and research, including permafrost dynamics, hydrology, vegetation changes. And today I'm going to be talking with you about Arctic co-production of knowledge in the Yukon and some of the work that ABoVE has been working on for a number of years and that I joined very recently in this last summer on the ground in the Yukon. So I came from the military, and so I was always trained to put the bottom line up front. So let's review what we're going to talk about today. Across scales, I think we're all clear that collaboration is really important for Arctic change monitoring. That became even more clear during COVID when research trips stopped for all the Western and lower 48 states. So there's a lot of different ways that Arctic collaboration is really important. Prioritizing good relationship building is also really, really critical, and maintaining strong relationships as we maintain our really strong databases and thinking about those as equal goals. Just reiterating and reminding all of us, I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the ABoVE missions, so I'm going to go over a quick review of that, but ABoVE data is a phenomenal one-of-a-kind resource for a changing Arctic. And there are some inherent challenging barriers to getting access to NASA data. And that's part of what this conversation is about, is how to make sure that those barriers are lowered so that everyone who needs the NASA data is able to get it. So again, just to review that everyone I'm sure is absolutely familiar with, Arctic change is unprecedented and the rapidity is just increasing, the scale is increasing. I just came directly from a talk that JPL was hosting with the Center for Climate and Security and others in DC. And Aaron Sikorsky from the center was talking about how Russia may actually be feeling kind of vulnerable right now because the permafrost is changing. It's no longer, this huge expanse of frozen ground that's changing the dynamics of whether or not Russia has more access points. And that's just one small example of all the different implications of this. This is a picture from the paper that Foster et al. Just put out. Really excellent, neat work from the ABoVE team looking at disturbances, just phenomenal collection of disturbances across the northern hemisphere permafrost region, and this specifically in our region. And then something that we put together in Nature, Earth and Environmental Science about how climate-driven instability will continue to affect the ocean, atmosphere, and terrestrial systems. So in order to understand what's going on in the Arctic, because it doesn't have the same kind of population density as other parts of the world, a number of different techniques have been put forward. You can see this is something that we put forward in the same Nature paper, looking at all the different ways that we have to observe the Arctic, going from permanent campaign and towers in situ, so field work and towers, to airborne. And that is where we're going to be focusing today. And then also to satellite, which we won't be talking about at all today, but there's a lot of really cool breakthroughs recently and emergent for looking at the Arctic in a variety of ways using satellite imagery. Now, again, I'm sure we're all familiar, but just in case we have folks joining us who are not as familiar with the NASA ABoVE campaign, this is an example of an airborne campaign that has this amazing ability to look at the regional changes and regional coverage of the vegetation, hydrology, and then the year to year. So both the spatio and temporal changes. There's been a ton of work coming from the ABoVE campaign on everything from fires to vegetation to hotspot detection for methane and for other greenhouse gases to ungulate range. So the wealth of data here, I just cannot say enough, is really profound, and huge credit to the ABoVE leadership team and all of the PIs over the last 3 phases who have really worked very hard to put all this together. But what this also means is that we have this incredible data set that we need to make sure is being shared with all of the folks who are holding some kind of interest in the Arctic. So whether that be folks who are making policy in DC, maybe that be companies in Maine who are trying to understand the way the circulation in the near ocean is changing, or whether that be folks on the ground in the Arctic who are either government or individuals. I've got somebody with an open mic, so I do need you to go ahead and mute, please. Looks like it might be Andy Black. So there's a lot of challenges that particularly Western science is facing because the Arctic is, like I said, not as heavily populated, because it's far away from where many of us live, because there's really big challenges with light and temperature. And because of that, it's been a challenge to forecast seasonal trends, locations and rates of abrupt thaw and disturbances. Whether the Arctic is wetting or drying, or sometimes we say greening or browning, what the thaw patterns are like, and what the structure and hydrology of the landscape is like now, will be tomorrow, and will be 5 years in the future, especially since things are changing so rapidly. We're not going to be talking as much about this, but also the potential for greenhouse gas release. Oh, and there's a typo on my slide, excuse me. So the potential for greenhouse gas release is something we often call the permafrost carbon feedback. And there's a lot of variability and challenges that go into predicting that as well. And so it's very, very clear that with, even though we have this incredibly dense, wonderful data set, we have really, really strong problems, really challenging, diverse, multi-layered problems that we as a global population are having to deal with, especially in the Arctic. And some of these do have really specific direct impacts to everything from ungulate range. This is a postcard we put together for some of the meetings that we did in the summer, to the greening and browning that I just mentioned, and the way the vegetation is shifting across the Arctic. So it's become clear that what we really, really need to do is make sure that we've got the regional knowledge that is the richest, longest data set. So ABoVE has this amazing, 10-year plus data set. Now we're talking about 2,000 plus years of data. And part of generating this information together, making sure we're forecasting impacts to communities, forecasting regional change and Arctic change, and starting to think about what the implications are for all of these different dynamics, is integrating, like I said, the regional stakeholders, which are oftentimes in the form of First Nations, Arctic residents, research institutions that are put forward by both, and then a variety of different kinds of collaborators. So it can be everything from folks who are fishing and have been fishing for a few generations for the commercial side, or just for subsistence, or children who are seeing differences in their local community and they want to be citizen scientists. There's a lot of different ways that collaborators can take shape. So that's kind of the catch-all for all of the really wonderful diversity of humans who might be interested in supplementing the work of the first three. So the responsibility is with the Western researchers who are going to the Arctic, right, who are not living in the Arctic, to practice good relations with people who do live in the Arctic. This includes co-producing science needs and results. So what is important for us to look at? Not what is just important to Harvard, what is just important to UPenn, but also what is important to people who live in the area. And why? Are there things that people who live in Pennsylvania, or like me in Los Angeles, aren't thinking about, but are really apparent to people who live in the area? And that's true for any geographic area, right? I'm sure there's stuff in all of our hometowns that we know about that maybe someone who's coming to visit for a week won't know about. Also, co-monitoring research activities and instruments. Working together from the very, very beginning means that if we do have something like a global pandemic, heaven forbid, then we will be able to have a continuity of data and a continuity of research that we're all interested in, because there's multiple different regions involved, there's multiple different people involved. And then a big part of practicing good relations is equally valuing indigenous science or indigenous knowledge and dominant Western science. So dominant science is a concept put out by a couple different thinkers in this space that it's just currently the main way that we're discussing science is this Western methodology. So specifically in the Yukon, I wanted to get a little bit into what me and the Polar folks, Polar Knowledge Canada, did this summer to reach out to people that had either been a part of Yukon before, and we just had a huge gap because of COVID, or are new to the ABoVE community, and how we got an understanding of what was meaningful to everybody and started developing these friendships. I like to think of collaborations, whether it's between me and other researchers at universities or between me and anybody else. I like to think of them as friendships that require that same level of care and interaction. So some of the things that we have been thinking and talking about both before I went up to the Yukon and joined Polar Knowledge Canada collaborators, and also since, are proprietary data and intellectual property. So when we're talking about folks who have different ways of talking, so sometimes I write everything down on a Word document and email it, while a friend of mine may be really comfortable with just sharing the information orally and talking about, stories that they've heard and now they're giving to me. And both of those things are intellectual property, right? But sometimes traditionally we've prioritized one shape over another. So re-elevating all the different types of intellectual property and proprietary data and treating it with the same level of care, right? We don't necessarily have a server right now. My friends in the DNA are working on it. Right now, we don't necessarily have a server of some of the stories that have been shared, but it still needs to have that same weight as any data that we do put on a server. And then we have to think about how sharing knowledge and relationships benefit the community, right? I think we often call it parachute science, where folks come from a different area and, take, basically. It's like when you go to the beach and just take a bunch of shells and then take them with you back to your house. It doesn't really benefit any of the creatures that might need the shells, and it doesn't really benefit the ocean. And so if we think about data in the same way, if we just only take information and we never give back to the local ecosystem or to the people who live there, it really doesn't benefit the community. And then making sure that everyone is allocated equal time, space, and weight, whether that's one-on-one, taking someone out for coffee and making sure that I'm talking and they're talking, I'm not just sitting there talking at them, or if that's, a bigger meeting, or if that's a forum, making sure that everyone gets the opportunity to speak. And maybe sometimes that involves asking someone directly, hey, I haven't seen you had the opportunity to speak yet. Would you like to? We're practicing that in a lot of our communities, and a lot of my NASA projects practice this as well, making sure that people who maybe don't feel as comfortable just raising their hand and sharing their voice, I guess, has the opportunity to. And then valuing different forms of knowledge. This is a quote from a Nature climate change comment that we still have in review from a collaborator of mine, Jared Gonnet, that the indigenous knowledge that he is familiar with and bringing is more holistic, includes observations, oral histories, and years of knowledge. So valuing all of that. Some of the collaborations building we did over the summer that both led me to these conclusions and helped me really think about this are different First Nations, including the Champagne-Ajax First Nation. Here, I'm actually going to use my cursor, which is right here near Haines Junction. Carcross and Tagish, we had a little bit of a discussion with the Tlingit First Nation, Liard First Nation, Council of Yukon, which kind of covers this whole area, and then Kluane First Nation over here. So you can see there's some folks that definitely still need to continue having conversations with. The Kwalin Dun didn't spend as much time chatting with them. But then we also did reach out to Yukon University, which is right here in Whitehorse, and the Yukon government. So specifically, I was really interested, in addition to making new friendships, in what I could give, what we could give, what ABoVE could give. Again, just coming back over and over again to this incredibly rich data set. And so this is some of the things that were requested. There was actually some flight lines requested by Champaign-Ajax, which is really cool. We weren't able to do it last year because of the smoke and the clouds. So the smoke cleared and then the clouds came in. But hopefully considering that for next year, thinking about what flights could look like when they happen. And then other different dynamic stat things that are happening in the ecosystem. So whether that be lake imagery or a permafrost distribution map, which we can get from other sources, beetle death maps or beaver dams, all of these different things that either are already in the science products that we're generating or that can be derived. We also have put together a number of deliverables, the synthesis document of climate change and ecosystems in the region. I'm going to get into that in just a second. Obviously, ongoing partnership and consultation. I've already had three meetings this week, and it's always really nice to see people on Zoom. So I'm really glad that we have all these tools now. The potential to put together a ROSES proposal. I'm also talking to someone who might be interested in doing a postdoc, focusing on really strengthening and building these collaborations. And then a couple different other papers, including the paper that I talked about earlier that's going into Nature, or went into Nature Climate Change about co-production of knowledge. So for the first time ever, I am very excited to premiere Dr. Latha Bhaskaran's beautiful maps. Dr. Bhaskaran is here with us today, so I hope we all get the opportunity to celebrate her in just a moment. But if you remember, one of the main asks was a synthesis product. So thinking and talking about how data that we store in, a DAC, which is already, the acronyms are just crazy at NASA, how that can be taken and put in a form that anyone can ingest, no matter what their discipline, background, what they do. So this is our first draft. This is, like I said, a map that Latha put together using the ABoVE data and other data sources. And you can see the distribution of land cover. This is from the 2014 opportunities of retrievals here. And you can see evergreen forest, deciduous forest, and you can obviously understand how this could be really important. Even at this scale, you can see the way that the water bodies and the vegetation interacts. And that was something that Council of Yukon really wanted to know about as they're building out their salmon maps. Where are the salmon moving? Where are they spawning? Where are the challenges, blocks, maybe dams? What are the challenges to the food system? And you can see how this would build that out. And this is something they specifically asked for. You can also see the way that different vegetation structure changes over the range. For folks who don't know, this is over in Kluane. This is a very, very lovely range of glaciers. And you can see the vegetation change as you go up to it. And then anytime that there was going to be subsidence, any kind of mines that might be going in, this would also be a tool that could be used for that. So from there, I'm going to go through these maps, and Latha and I are going to write a synthesis paper overviewing what's going on in the region and potential forecasts for next steps. And that was asked, this is another stunning map, canopy tree cover. That was asked for by Champaign-Ajax specifically, and then everyone kind of echoed, both Kluane and Council of Yukon, because their science teams are tiny, which, 10 years ago was probably pretty good. They've got 3 people. They're working a great area, but they're incredible people. They're super smart. They can handle a variety of disciplines. But now that you're having the level of change that we're seeing, the level of vegetation change, ungulate range change, permafrost subsidence, sometimes critical emergencies that a house is actually subsiding, hydrology change, all of these things are now falling upon 3 people, in the case of Champaign-Ajax and the science team. And that's enormous. I can't even imagine. So having us come in and kind of share the products that we already have access to, the data that we already have, and then write up in a really simple form that they can share with any community member. This is what's currently happening in these variety of ways, and this is what we could potentially foresee in the future. Could be a really useful tool that they don't have to, the science team doesn't have to do themselves, right? So we just were able to pull out all of the data. Latha put it in the maps. We're going to write it up. And that's a ton of time and effort that the science team doesn't have to do, but they still have this critical data. So I'd like to think that this is the first step towards a really nice collaboration where we're giving something back to our friends as we're developing this relationship. I'm actually going to find out this afternoon. I have my first sit down to show these maps. I actually showed them to you guys before I showed it to the people who requested them. So I'll let you know. Latha and I might be going back to the drawing board, but right now I'm hopeful that this will be a helpful and valuable resource. So I wanted to just kind of end with a couple different things. This is from the National Inuit Strategy on Research. And the phrase "nothing about us without us" is my absolute favorite. I've been saying it pretty regularly because it's so easy to remember and it's so easy. It really hits home, I think. So, remembering that when we do regional science in any region, today we're talking about the Arctic, but it's true for any region. If I'm going to the Bayou, if I'm going to Chile, always engaging with the people who live in that region. And, I think it's clear, hopefully I've made it clear in this talk, that there's a variety of reasons for that always benefit the scientists coming in as well. Um, some of my friends at Polar made me aware of Max Liboron, who actually works and lives in Newfoundland and wrote an incredible book that I've been really thinking a lot about called Pollution as Colonialism. And they wrote down this really nice quote. I'm going to be a little bit anthropology with you now and read you a quote. Colonialism is not a historical event, but an ongoing set of relations that still characterize the common sense of professional science. As more scientists come to realize that science has power relations that do not serve all people equally, we are left trying to understand how we might change the way science is done. Treat Indigenous knowledge as expertise rather than culture. Cite us. Pay us as experts when you need us in your classrooms and panels. And talk to us before you complete a grant application as full collaborators, rather than unfunded additions at the end. So just a gentle reminder from all of us. And then this is a picture I took of the sign demarcating this road that I was jogging on as Kwalundun settlement land. Here's some good resources. The figure on the right was made by a former student of mine, who's now a very successful data scientist, very proud of her. And on the right or on the left, you'll see a variety of different resources. Would encourage you to think about taking a picture of this slide. These are all really, really nice places to start to get an understanding of engagement, decolonial science. And we've got everything from the national academies to a friend of mine, Leslie Canvera's AI system, and the National Inuit Strategy on Research. So with that, I'm really hoping that we're going to have the opportunity to chat. I think I kind of plowed through all that, and I would love to hear thoughts, comments, feedbacks, ways that I can improve, anything like that. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with everyone today.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. So there is, if people are feeling like they would rather interact via text, there is a chat um, box where you can put any questions or comments. Or again, I think we're a small enough group that if people want to unmute themselves and go ahead and do so, or there is a raise hand function, we could do that as well. But I think we're probably even small enough that we can just have people jump in if necessary. Um, Anybody have anything to start? I see Sandra has her hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, Kimberly. Great talk.
It's
I was,
a little hard to hear you.
um, hello?
That's a little better, but you're very quiet. So if you could, yeah, be close to your mic, I guess. Can you
Yeah.
hear her, Kimberly? Yeah. Okay. Go for
Okay.
it. Try it.
I'm, I was just wanting to comment on your collaborations with Kluane and Champlain and Ajax First Nations, because I'm actually doing a project in the area, specifically looking at the bark beetle affected stands in the region, and you had mentioned that there is interest in having products of beetle death there. Yeah, so I'm just curious about those conversations that were had and anything on that really.
Sure, Sandra, and I really apologize for not knowing. Would you mind sharing a little bit more of your background? Are you working on this with ABoVE? Are you doing it externally? Are you phase three? I'm sorry, I'm really not fully up to speed with everybody's projects yet.
Yeah, no worries. We actually just relatively recently joined as an affiliated project, and we're out of Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. I'm supervised by Dr. Ryan Danby, and he's done a lot of work in Kluane in the past. And so this past summer, we went out there and we did some field sampling of the area. So if we could link up and maybe just talk more about Champagne and Ajax's interest, if there's an interest in beetle related stuff, and just create a more synergistic sort of approach with that, so that there's there aren't like different groups trying to contact about the same thing, or you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, no, of course, that's smart. I love that. So I'm actually meeting with Champagne Ajax this afternoon. So I'll mention it to them, see what their interest is and what their preference is. Obviously, I don't need to be a go-between unless that's their preference. And again, because many folks contacting, everyone has so much to do. So I will absolutely ask about that. As far as the maps go, we don't currently have bark beetle as part of the mapping that Latha has put together. So I think probably that is something that we're going to be needing to add, is almost like this more disturbance model, because we'll be able to derive some vegetation information from that and food system information from that. So I guess long and short is like, yes, and let's talk more. And I will ask what the preferred method of interaction is.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I see Peter and then Liz.
We might be about to say the same thing. We were able to fly the bark beetle area with a UAV SAR in August. And so we should have a time series from 2017, 18, 19, and now 2022, Sandra, for your use.
And Liz. Oh, so
Well, if Sandra wants to say something, she go first.
yeah.
I was just saying thanks for the mention there.
And I was just going to say that Kimberly, as you and Lapa work on the synthesis, we could chat some too to see if there are other projects or whatnot that are happening in that region, or other data products that maybe haven't quite made it to your list yet. So we could kind of sync up and see if there's anything else that I might remember that might be helpful for you guys.
Thanks so much, Liz. That would be great. And I'm sitting over here making notes. That's why I'm looking down. I think that this is going to be really great. So thank you very much.
I think that one of the things that I feel like would be good to sort of think about is, you were able to do this in the time that you spent sort of in and around Whitehorse, and I think that obviously these considerations and approaches apply to the whole ABoVE study domain. And one of the things that I think about a lot, but haven't sort of exactly figured out what is the best way that, say, the people in the support office can kind of help make these types of relationship building and activities happen. Kind of either sort of replicating some or all of what you did. I don't know if you have ideas about sort of like, do we, yeah, just sort of general, like, I think that it's good if we sort of move forward in doing these kind of things elsewhere as well. But it requires a lot of time and face to face and relationship stuff, like you were saying. So
It does require a lot of time, and I was really blessed that I cold called and cold emailed a lot of people that Polar and Yukon government suggested in the lands offices of different First Nations in the area, and people responded,
Yeah.
which, it's a huge ask. But what really worked for me, and what I would probably suggest for a variety of folks moving forward, is changing from what we often do, which is this town hall format, and doing, more one-on-one or small group meetings, making sure, to take people out to coffee or to meet them for an after work beverage and, have a little bit, again, more like, friendship meetings. And some of those occurred in offices where I just happened to show up with pastry and coffees, or some of them actually occurred in an after work meeting space. And I think for me, that really worked a little bit better, both because of who I am as a person and the way that I interact, but also because it made it an easier place to set up a real deep relationship, or at least the beginning of a friendship. Let me say that. I don't know about deep relationships. We'll see if people let me stick around and keep hanging out with me.
Well, Jamie, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi, Kimberly. I was just wondering if you could give a bit of a timeline for the release of those maps that you showed. Those looked really interesting, particularly the one you showed where looked like you were mapping some bogs and fens and other wetland types in the southern Yukon. So just wondering what would that type timeline for those to be released, and along with like I guess the write up, the methodologies for how you created those maps.
Sure. Jamie, where are you out of? Are you in the Yukon?
I'm in the Yukon. I'm with Ducks Unlimited Canada, based
Or
here
you're
in
with Ducks
Whitehorse.
Unlimited? Okay. Okay, so the answer is a little bit different for you than for general public, right? So my intention, I mean, if we don't have to start again this afternoon, if people are reasonably okay with what we've created so far, I'm going to probably sit down on the airplane when I'm going out of town next week, and then for the next few weeks, and kind of write up synthesis. Probably Latha I'll ask you to make a couple more maps, and we'll work together on those. So I'm hoping that by the end of December, I'll at least have a draft of a 2-pager written up with kind of 2 to 3 pager of what we've seen and what we could be seeing moving forward, with best available knowledge and our own, specific perspective. Ideally, we would have something ready to publish in the peer review literature by, I don't know, let's try to do a good job the first time. So let's say the end of February, have something ready to go to the peer review literature. But because you're in the area and because you are Ducks Unlimited and so excellent, I would be more than happy to share the 2-pager with you guys as well at the end of December, if that would be of use.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, the more comprehensive one, might be more useful, but at
Okay,
least you'll have a 2-pager to start with, and I'll write your name down right now. Make sure I do that.
great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Iqbal, I see you also have your hand raised.
Yeah, just a quick one. Thanks a lot for a great presentation. Iqbal Bhatti here from the GNWT, the Government of Northwest Territories in Yellowknife. I know the study was based in the Yukon, but we are also up here, so to speak. So if there is a chance to to broaden the scope of this thing, it would be we welcome you here and do some studies here, so we can also get some data about the Northwest Territories.
Sure. I probably don't have sufficient funding to do it myself, but maybe that's something that Liz, Peter, Chip, Libby, and I can discuss and see what that would look like. Does that feel like a sufficient-ish answer for right now?
Yeah, just wanted to put it out there that we also appreciate as much information and data related to the Northwest Territories as we can get. And I think NASA they were here in the summer doing some greenhouse gas studies, and my colleague here, Bruce Hanna, normally deals with this, but I just thought I'd put it out there and say that you're welcome to do studies here as well.
Well, thank you so much, Iqbal. I really appreciate it, and I would love to chat more about it. I would also love to figure out a way for us to provide whatever you all are looking for. So let me do both, follow up with you, and have a conversation with everybody.
Thank
Iqbal, you could talk with Melanie Desjardins as well. You probably know her. And we've had a lot of consultations with the GNWT Geomatics Center, which we need to return and to NWT and make another round of.
Thank you. I will do that.
Do we have any other questions? I just want to remind folks that we have been recording this, and we have recorded the prior webinars for this. And it might take a day or two to get them all processed, but we then put them up on the website. I will put the link in where you can see, prior talks that we have had. And also, so here, let's see, I'm going to put in a couple of links here. The first one just lists the overall meetings, and then you can see that we've once focused on Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Alaska. And here is the specific Yukon page, is that second link. Oops, that looks like it's the same link. Here we are. Apologies. Okay. And if this the way that you got here is somebody forwarded you the information and you would like to continue to receive notices from us about these talks that we organize, please feel free to drop me a line and we can get you on the distribution list. I'm putting my email in the chat as well. And I see that Latha, you have your hand raised?
Yes, hi. So I just thanks Kimberly for the nice shout out on the map. So I appreciate that. And I also wanted to check, if there are other resources, other studies in the area, it would be great to know about those. I did make a note to talk to Liz and I believe it was Sandra. About some research of the area so that we can put together some of these data sets. I've just been combing through ABoVE, the DAC website, and also some other resources to find maps. So any additional information would be great. Thank you.
So I guess if folks have resources that they know about or have created, please feel free to share your email in the chat or send any of us, leadership team, or me and Latha an email. And yeah, absolutely, we will follow up with Liz as well. And hope to capture a lot of this for Yukon. Ideally, once we have a cool methodology for this, then we'll be able to think about the Northwest Territories as well. Iqbal.
Okay, well, thank you, Kimberly, once again for giving us this great presentation. Thanks to everybody for joining us for this discussion and conversation. And I will be sending out a notice when this is posted to the website. So I'm going to stop recording now, and thanks once again.